Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. I'm your host, Josh Amick, with my panel, Fritz, John, and Ian. Mark is still resting up, so Mark, we wish you all the best. We're going to get right into this week, which is the last week of the regular season, and the game at the top of everyone's list, at least here in Montana, is the Cat Grizz game, Battle of the Brawl, whatever you'd like to call it. There's a chance for the Bobcats to finish the season undefeated. Is there any chance that the Grizz ruin their season with this rivalry, or does Montana State close out the deal? And if the Grizz happen to lose, does it affect them getting into the playoffs, Fritz?
Well, man, the Bobcats are serious overdogs. They're just, they're 10-0. So the Grizz have had their issues stopping certain solid run games, and I'd say that includes Portland State last week. They had a little issue there with those inside zones that they bounced outside. And the Bobcats have what I would call more than solid run game. So I don't see the upset happening. But I do note that 2 years ago, the Grizz went in there and gave up 400 yards rushing and lost 55-21. And I thought there was a chance they might get left out of the playoffs, and they were not. And instead, they wound up with 2 home games because they won their first one and won another one, and then wound up going on the road and losing big to NDSU. I just think they're in. I think they get a home game this coming weekend, Thanksgiving weekend, because they tend to still draw a pretty good crowd that weekend. And I think they're in. Sam Herder of Hero Sports agrees too, according to his latest bracketology. The Grizz are in.
Yeah, I think that Montana needs a perfect game for them to take down Montana State, especially going into Bozeman. Bobcat Stadium's going to be rocking like it always is. The Brawl of the Wild is a special environment. So, I just don't see anything getting in the way of Montana State unless Montana can put together a game that they have not put together this season. Conversely, I don't think that this is a make or break game for Montana either, like Fritz was saying. I do think that they're in. I think that barring an absolute dismal showing and a blowout, I think that they're going to be hosting a game on that first weekend into the top 16 seeds. And if you look back at some of the games from earlier this season, that kind of helps them out. Like Missouri State game especially helps them out in that regard, with the Bears going 6-1 in Missouri Valley play. Western Carolina win isn't as impressive as we thought it might have been, but it was a ranked win at the time. And that loss to North Dakota State does kind of sting, but the Grizz got the games that they needed to win as W's, and that's what's key at this point.
I'll just say, maybe anything could happen in a rivalry game, but I do think that Montana State's going to win this game. If you take a look at recent history, each of the winners flipped the last 4 years, including Montana's 37-7 win last year. But yeah, I agree. I think Montana's a safe bet for the playoffs. I think they've done enough this year to prove that they've made it, they qualified into this game, unless they pull an Idaho State and give up 77 points.
Yeah, I do want to mention that last week when we were previewing this game, talking to Coach Hawk, he did say that the last 4 meetings, the home team has won. So if that trend continues, Montana State will pull it off. But he also did mention how big it was to get the win against Portland State. So I think everyone is kind of on the same board that Montana should get in because of that win with Portland State. Might be a different conversation if Fife didn't play the way he did in the second half. And maybe that's why they were so nervous and not playing well with those drops and stuff, because they knew how bad they needed that win. But anything can happen in rivalry week, right? So we'll see. But in the spirit of playoff talk, we got to figure NAU needs to get a win to get a playoff seed. Eastern has been playing really well lately. Do you think that this game is going to be a lot closer than we expected, or do you think with NAU and the home field advantage that we've talked about all year, still gets it done, John?
I think that NAU's kind of gotten their things together right now. They've played some solid games, albeit the games that they've won haven't been against top competition. Noticing their schedule, their 4 losses this season have been to Arizona out of the FBS, and they were ranked at the time. Incarnate Word, who's becoming an FCS power year in and year out nowadays. Montana, in Missoula, and then at Idaho also. So those are 4 games that would really have been nice to get one of those wins, just to kind of sure in the playoffs. But NAU is going to have to go out there and play their best football. I know Fritz loves the home field advantage that the Sky Dome brings, and it needs to be a home field advantage this weekend against Eastern. They need to get this win, or else it's going to be a very rough selection Sunday for them.
Yeah, I actually think this game's kind of a must win for both sides for very different reasons. Obviously, NAU needs another win to really kind of seal the deal on them making it into the postseason. But for Eastern, I think they really need a win to for like we mentioned on the last episode, maybe getting some players in the portal to come in and shore up on that defense, and maybe for the coaching staff needing a win to get to 5 wins this year. I think it was 3 wins a couple years ago, 4 wins a couple years ago. Get to 5 this year, just to kind of show that hey, we're maybe making a little bit of improvements. But actually, for me, I think I'm leaning more towards Eastern in this game. I know they have to go on the road. I know what NAU is playing for. I just think that Eastern's riding a little bit higher, especially after a win last week.
Yeah, yeah, and I kind of agree. I just think it would be a signature win for Eastern if they pulled this off. God, they're playing so well. They're scoring so many points, and I think NEU is pretty solid defensively. Um, I've I've talked about home field advantage, but only in the context is they never really had it until this year, and I really can't. It's kind of a pick 'em right now. I might need a couple more minutes to figure out who's going to win this game for my picks. Um, but yeah, it'd be a signature win for Eastern, and it might really help Travis Best, who I think is in the walk year of his contract. I don't think he has a new contract yet. So yeah, big game for both sides.
Yeah, in the latest rankings, I think they had NAU. They moved up from 25 last week to 21 this week. So got to figure they got to get this win just to be on the tier of making the top 16 list. But we shall see. It should be a good game, especially with how well Eastern has been playing. Idaho heads to Pocatello to play Idaho State. Does the home field advantage mean anything in this game with the rivalry, or the Vandals on upset alert at all? Or do you think that the Vandals take care of business and win pretty easily against Idaho State?
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep bringing it up because I still can't believe it. I can't believe Idaho State gave up 77 points last week, and therefore I'm not gonna pick the team that gave up 77 points last week. I'm gonna roll with Idaho in this one. Sure, they have to go on the road, but they have won the last three games in this matchup or this series. They're playing for the Potato Trophy for the first time this year. I think that'll be a really cool little thing to add to this rivalry. But yeah, I think it's going to be a big win for the Vandals, especially after a bit of a close game last week against Weber State. I think they're going to go into the playoffs riding high with some momentum.
Well, yeah, I think Idaho's still a favorite. I wish Mark Nelke was here to help us. Shout out to him. He had a little, I don't know if it was a lower leg injury or a higher leg injury last week, but he's not with us in this panel today.
And then in the form of college fashion, we'll just say it's an undisclosed leg injury.
It's an undisclosed leg injury that he suffered last week on the sidelines. But the Idaho State's defense obviously is a little bit of a sore spot right now. So I think Idaho, whoever starts a quarterback, whichever mark it is, we can go, or whichever jack it is, we can pick the Vandals, and then they'll wind up with the home game in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think that Idaho's got to have the advantage in this one, at least on paper. I think Idaho State's defense is going to come out a little extra fired up after all this talk and giving up 77 points last week, but I still don't see them playing good enough defense to shut down this Idaho offense that despite, all the injuries and everything, whatever Jack does start at quarterback, whoever is in at running back, they seem to be able to get it done week in and week out. So I think it might be a little closer than we're thinking. I definitely don't think it's going to be Idaho State giving up 77 points again. But I do think that the Vandals will get it done. And I would like to also say that the basketball rivalry for this has a much better trophy with King Spud over the Potato State Trophy.
Yeah, I saw the Potato Trophy this morning, and I was like, that's something. But also, I did also see on Twitter, X, whatever you prefer to call it, that the game is already sold out. So it is going to be a packed home field advantage house, and I think it's going to be interesting. I agree with John that it's going to be closer than people expect just because Idaho State, how they played last week. And I think Idaho also played down to their expectations. So I think both teams are going to be fired up. It might be a real close second half, and then the better team, the Vandals, pulled it off in the second half. But we'll see. I think it's going to be a better game than we expect. Another game that probably won't be as close is UC Davis looking to bounce back against Sacramento State, who has just been reeling, as we talked about in the last episode. But I do want to mention, though, how can the Aggies avoid playing down to their opponent? And with this being Sac State's last game of the season, you got to figure they have quite a few seniors and people that are pissed off the way the season went, and they want to get things right. What do you think about this, Ian?
I think you just have to use the results of last game as motivation, and you can't dwell on it. This last week was a game that if UC Davis shows up in that second and third quarter, they might be winning. They might have won this game, and things are going a lot differently this week for them. But like I said, can't dwell on a loss. You have to come out, maybe show a little fire, get the offense rolling early. Because, I think we're all in agreement that this is a game that UC Davis should win. I think they're going to win and win pretty convincingly, roll into the playoffs with some momentum, and get that 10th win of the year.
Yeah, I think Davis has to be favored. I think Sac State could make some noise. I think Hastings has played well, but he hasn't played quite as well if there's pressure. So I think Sac State could bring the house, playing at home. What do they have to lose? A lot to gain, be a signature win at the end of a rough year. And, then there's the point of UC Davis needs to win probably, and, maybe get Lane Larson, who has so many touches this year, give him a week off so he can get ready for the playoffs. And so I'll see how much they play him on Saturday. If they need him, they might. But I think Davis is going to win, should win.
I kind of have felt this for the last couple of weeks, but I feel like Sac State's just kind of given up on this season. They've kind of just stopped putting in the effort that it takes to go out and win these games, especially in the Big Sky Conference. Davis, they're a team that, they got the short end of the stick last year with the playoff, with being left out of the playoffs. So if anybody's going to know anything about coming to seeding and playing what you need to be at your best coming into the playoff time, they're going to want to go out there and put on style points to help their seeding, and that can definitely help them. So I don't think that they're going to take this one for granted in any regards in terms of that. And we've mentioned the rivalry aspect of games. Anything can happen, so you can't just kind of roll over for a rival, especially when you're just a few miles apart like Davis and Sacramento are. So I think this game could be good. I don't think that it will be good. I do think that Davis is going to go out there and keep their foot on the pedal through 4 quarters.
All right, that's going to wrap up all the topics this week. Now we're going to get into my favorite portion of the season. You're surprised I'm this optimistic about making picks because I've been at the bottom of the list all throughout the year, but I still love hearing people's thoughts on how these games should go. Nothing really changed except for Fritz extended his lead. He went 6-0 last week. I don't have the records in front of me, but I believe he's now 73-15 on the year. And Mark went 6-0, and he is now tied with Ian for second place. And then it's John and myself. Sorry, I don't have the records in front of me. I'll have that for you next week. But Fritz, as always, kick us off with your picks. And who you got this weekend?
Well, I've got a couple road teams winning, but it's farther down the list. I'm going to pick the Wildcats over the Grizz. I'm going to pick Weber over Cal Poly. I'm going to pick NAU over Eastern. That should be a split among us pickers, I think. I got Portland State over over Northern Colorado, and then I'm going to pick Davis over Sac State and Idaho to go down and win in the mini dome and beat the Bengals.
All right. I'll tell you what Mark's picks are. So Mark has Montana State. He also has Weber State winning, Northern Arizona over Eastern, Portland State over Northern Colorado, UC Davis over Sacramento State, and Idaho over Idaho State. So he has the same picks as Fritz. So looks like he won't make up any ground this week if he does want to try to get a chance at that title. But Ian, you got anything different for us, or your picks looking the same as well?
I think everything else is the same, except I'm going to go with Eastern over Northern Arizona. Not just to have a different pick, but I do really think that Eastern's going to win this game and maybe play a little bit of spoiler towards NAU. And I don't remember what Fritz picked for the Weber State game, but I picked Weber as well.
Yep, he also picked Weber State.
Okay.
So yep. And then Idaho over Idaho State, you got Idaho, Davis over Sac State, and Portland State over Northern Colorado. John, do you have anything different for us?
I wish I could say that I had some different choices, but I'm going to go with Montana State. I'm going to go with Weber. I'm going to go with NAU over Eastern. I do think that they will get themselves into the playoffs with a victory. I think that is going to be a tight game. Portland State over UNC, which we're very thankful that this isn't a battle of winless teams like we were potentially thinking it might be earlier in the season. I think Davis is going to run away with it over Sac State, and then I also have Idaho winning the Potato State Trophy.
All right. Well, I guess the one good news is I do have one different pick than everyone else, but that has not bode well for me all year. So I'm picking this team just out of spite because Weber State has cost me at least 3 games this year. So I also have Montana State over Montana. I got Cal Poly beating Weber State. NAU over Eastern, but I do agree with Ian. I do think that could possibly end up being the game of the week. And I think if anyone's going to pull off a quote-unquote upset, I think Eastern is the team to do it. But I think they need to get the win to get in, so NAU will be ready. Portland State over Northern Colorado, Davis over Sac State, and Idaho winning the Potato Trophy over Idaho State. And what should be a very packed house in Pocatello should be a great game. But that's going to wrap up this episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. I want to thank my panel, as always, and shout-outs to Mark. We hope that you get better soon and that you rejoin us safely or rejoin us soon for the playoffs, because we'll definitely need your expertise during that part of the season. But thank you to everyone for joining us. We'll see you all next Tuesday on another episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. Until then, take care.